Hello again, everyone. This is Jeff here, otherwise known as the Economic Prepper. Welcome back to the program. Appreciate you taking the time. I'll keep it nice and short and sweet like you'd like me to do, so I know your time is valuable. I'm going to jump right into it. The Internal Revenue Service is now becoming the External Revenue Service. I'll share the tweets. I'll share the stories. I'll share what I think is happening next week. And we're all wondering what's going to happen because Monday, Trump's back as the president. As of noon Eastern, he'll be sworn in. He will be the president. Fingers crossed, no black swan, weird stuff happens. But we're looking at the end of an era, finally, with Trump extinguishing the Internal Revenue Service, which has been in existence since 1913, along with the Federal Reserve. They were both created the same year, because you need one. The Internal Revenue Service pays the interest on the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is neither federal nor does it have reserves. Basically, it's this financial system that created all this stuff, this debt-based financial system that we can never dig out of because we owe 36 trillion of these to whomever. Okay, I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to talk about what's happening the 19th and the 20th next week. I'm going to go into that, but before I do, if you like this kind of content, do the usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe, share it with a friend, help me grow, help me get my voice out there. It really helps the channel, encourages me to do more of this stuff. So, let me jump right in, let me share my screen. First off, I'm going to talk about next Sunday and Monday first, and then I'll go into the IRS thing, or the ERS, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But first off, here's the link, and I'll put it in the description. The inauguration. Which world leaders will attend? Is PM Modi invited? PM Modi has been invited. I'm going to go through. This is an article. It's a little bit older here, but it highlights who has been invited and who's coming. At least it did. Where did that story go? Why isn't there more? Oh, read more. Thank you. Sometimes they hide stuff. Okay. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, she's an advocate for throwing out people that are against their country and has done that recently. So she is very much she's a nationalist. El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, which you've probably heard that name before. El Salvador is one of the first countries that adopted Bitcoin. He spoke at Bitcoin, I would say 2021. Anyway, he was in Miami talking it up. El Salvador has paid off their debt because of Bitcoin, and they're doing great because of it. Who else is going to be there? We have, I don't know why it's not listed here, but Javier Milei is going to be there from Argentina. He's going to be there. Modi's been invited from India. Z has been invited from China. I believe Putin was invited, but he can't come because of world stage and the war there. He's considered a war criminal, so he's not going to be traveling anytime soon. But let me jump over to the other page. All right, I'll talk about this, and I'll talk about what I'm going to share next, and I'll sum it all up at the end. So let me just get to the other thing here, which is, this is on Twitter. So if you search external revenue, and you get these kind of tweets popping up. First off, from Wall Street, we've got the External Revenue Service. Okay, so there's Nayib Bukele talking again. There's Trump talking with Joe Rogan, but basically saying that we're one step closer to abolishing the IRS. The IRS, the Federal Reserve, another three-letter agency. I'll let you figure that out and put in the comments, and also a three-letter. I'll say a political action committee. I guess that's a good cut label for it. They were all created in 1913. If you can figure those two out, put them in the comments. But a lot of the things that happened in 1913 are going to be probably rolled back. Here's Jason Whitlock. He tweeted it out recently, so it's as good a place as any for me to go over what Mr. Trump said. And we said for far too long we've relied on taxing our great people for using the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS. Through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It is time for that to change. I am today announcing that I will create the External Revenue Service to collect our tariffs, duties, and all revenue that come from foreign sources. We will begin charging those that make money off of us with trade, and they will start paying, finally, their fair share. January 20th, 2025, which is next Monday, will be the birth date of the External Revenue Service, Make America Great Again. So, let me drop out of here and talk to you fine people, and we'll go over some. So, what is he talking about with the External Revenue Service? Well, the Internal Revenue Service, it's kind of like taking from ourselves. The Internal Revenue Service means you're taking funds from your internal organization inside the country, from the people, the income earners themselves, taking dollars out of their left pocket and putting them in the right pocket. But the right pocket is the government, and this is you being able to spend your money. So the thing is that even though it stays in the same pair of pants because it stays in the United States, who has control over it changes. But the net thing is that your entire pair of pants is still inside the United States. So the money stays within the United States. The External Revenue Service now has funds coming from outside of the U.S. and coming in, and then you can put it in your pocket. So you never have to tax your people. You don't have to tax their income. You can get rid of that internal revenue because now everybody who's working and exchanging their labor for these things and is supposed to be able to store value in money by exchanging their labor for the way it's supposed to work is you exchange labor for money. And then you take the money and you can spend it for assets or things that you need, or you could save it for a rainy day and spend it later. But the problem is that these things lose value over time. So, while I got two in my hand, they may only be worth one and then worth virtually nothing shortly thereafter. But the idea, back in 1913, they created the third national bank of the United States. First one was Alexander Hamilton, lasted 20 years. The second one, I think Hamilton, well, I'm not sure if Hamilton was the first or second, but the second one was killed by Andrew Jackson. That's why Andrew Jackson said I killed the bank. That was what he hung his hat on. He fought vigorously to get rid of that second national bank. And that's also why Trump had a picture of Andrew Jackson up in the Oval Office the first time around. He's a big fan of Jackson. He understands the monetary system and the problems it creates. Fix the money, fix the country, fix the world. Right? All these wars, all these different things, they all go back to who controls the money. Right? And the money, I'm using money and currency interchangeably. I understand. I know that money and currency are different, but sometimes it's just easier to say it that way. The point is that you don't want to have your people paying for the government over and over and over again when there's other ways to fund the government. Back before the Civil War, and I understand this is a modern time, things are different now, but back before the Civil War, the federal government from 1792 to 1860 was paid for almost entirely by tariffs. It was 80 to 95% of the spending of the federal government was paid for by tariffs. That's what we're trying to get back to right now. Since in 1913, when they increased the revenue because in the income tax, they increased the other revenues with by pushing the dollar all across the country. All right, I got interrupted by a phone call. I don't know where it was, so I'm just going to jump right into my final thoughts here. The Federal Reserve, created in 1913. Not a good thing. It was a third national bank. Andrew Jackson killed the second one. Trump wants to kill the third one. The External Revenue Service is a step in that direction. Between that and Doge dropping, the Federal Reserve, the federal government has a spending problem. They don't have an income problem. They have a spending problem. They, as I said before, the tariffs paid for almost the entire budget before the Civil War. After the Civil War, there was a very progressive time. There was Reconstruction. But back when McKinley was there, around the turn of the century, he was very nationalistic. He was pushing the financial system. It was a deflationary time. The Industrial Revolution, the modern machinery was making life easier for people. We were producing more goods, and we are very affluent, and we are doing great. And then the Federal Reserve stepped in. Creature from Jekyll Island. 1913, it got pushed across the finish line under Wilson. They made the Federal Reserve. They made the IRS. and they started taxing people more and more and more. And then once that, they started with, oh, it's only going to be the rich that get taxed. But then it got to be more and more people. And eventually the rich figured out, we don't want income. We don't want normal income because that gets income tax. We want to get dividends and assets and appreciation. So they got out of things like they owned businesses, they owned assets, they owned property, real estate, collectibles, anything that would produce a dividend and be treated differently than regular income, which is taxed the worst in the country since 1913. Trump realizes this, and he's putting an end to that through the External Revenue Service, trying to get us back to where we produce stuff and we push it out to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world pays us for it, and we use that to run our federal government. That's kind of like how it's supposed to work. And the federal government's super bloated. Most of the things that are done in the federal government don't need to be done, and they're not even arguable that's even constitutional. But most things should be pushed off to the states and let them do it, because the Federal Reserve, I keep saying Federal Reserve, the federal government was supposed to be put in place that we were supposed to be bottom up versus top down for our government. In other words, the sheriff in the county was supposed to be number one, right? They take care of everything they could possibly take care of in your neighborhood, in your community, and things that they can't because it's beyond their borders, beyond their purview. That's when the county and the state can step in. So if you have an issue that's statewide, that's when the state gets involved. But if there are things that beyond your state borders, like interstate commerce or national defense, that's when the federal government's supposed to get involved. Unfortunately, we've driven the national government push things top down way too much. That's what we're trying to get rid of. Slim down the government, slim down the spending, let external countries give us money to pay for our what we produce, and as part of that benefit, they help pay for our federal government. That's what the External Revenue Service is looking to do. But I've been saying for probably years now that I think that Trump, as a constitutionalist, is going to realize that, there were questions about even ratifying the income tax. Now it's going to be, this is one step closer. He's talked about getting rid of tax on tips, getting rid of tax on Social Security, not taxing civil servants. You do all that together. One thing that does all that all at once is get rid of the income tax en masse. Just get rid of it all. Now nobody's taxed on anything except for maybe a flat tax I've seen being proposed, or the External Revenue Service, which I love that title, the ERS. I think getting money from other countries to pay for our government is a perfect play, because quite frankly, the U.S. they're the big boy in charge, at least in the Western Hemisphere and most of the globe. They're looked to, like NATO looks at us all the time for doing it. So pay us. If we're going to defend you guys, pay us for that privilege, right? Why should we tax our own people when we're doing stuff for France, Germany, England, Spain? Let them give us some money to run our government, and we'll be happy to do some of the things that we've been doing already. So what are your thoughts? You think the IRS is going away? And if so, when? My deadline personally is I think that by July of 2026, it's gone. So I think 2025 might be the last year the IRS is even a factor. We may get through tax season this year and it could be gone. Who knows? Maybe people have to set up their accounting books and clean it up by the end of the year. But it could go very quickly. And this is one of the changes that I look forward to. And I think this is how we get on the road to economic recovery, which we desperately need, that much faster. But what are your thoughts? Leave a comment down below. I'll read them all, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.